The Callisto Protocol is a deeply flawed game that I dreaded playing, but I didn't hate it. I wasn't particularly angry, although there were times I wanted to unplug my Xbox and throw it out of my window like a frisbee. But I wasn't either of those things. More than anything, it made me sad, disappointed, dissatisfied. Now I know I'm late on this, and pretty much every video has been either ragging on it or singing its praises, telling everybody that they don't know how to play a horror game like the Callisto Protocol. But I wanted to throw my hat into the ring. And I'm going to rag on the game too, I'm going to be honest with you. But not because I want this IP to fail. I want this new IP to succeed. I mean, we haven't seen, new blood for a long time. So, I'd like to start by saying that I won't be comparing this game to Dead Space. Just because, it's a spiritual successor doesn't mean that the game shouldn't be judged on its own merits. So, I think as opposed to comparing it to its proverbial big brother, let's see how the game fares on its own. What did the game get right, and what did the game get so horribly wrong? In 2320, Jacob Lee and his partner Max Barrow are contract freight transporters working for the United Jupiter Company, or otherwise known as the UJC, and they're co-pilots of the UJC Charon, their ship. They've been ferrying shipments of an unlabeled volatile cargo between Europa and Black Iron Prison on Callisto, two of Jupiter's moons. And their latest run promises to be lucrative enough for them to retire. After clearing the Callisto security perimeter and setting course for Europa, the Charon is boarded by the Outer Way, a group reportedly responsible for a massive biological terrorist attack on Europa, and the ship is forced to crash land back on Callisto's surface. Max is killed, leaving Jacob and the Outer Way leader, Danny Nakamura, as the only survivors. Both are recovered by Black Iron Prison security head Captain Leon Ferris, and they're incarcerated without charges or trial on the orders of Warden Duncan Cole. Jacob awakens after the grueling intake process to find the prison being overrun by these hostile biophages, or, for lack of better words, space zombies. Inmates afflicted with an unknown disease. And Jacob comes across Elias Porter. He's been in the prison half his life, and he will not let you forget it.
Yo, look, I've been in here half my life.
Yeah, sure know a lot about this place.
Yeah, I've had nothing but time.
Are you getting in there?
Yeah, I wish we could. It's not gonna be that easy, bro. Look, I've been here a long time. I've got privileges that you don't.
I never asked you. What are you in for?
What? You worried you're helping a murderer escape?
Well, yeah, kinda.
Well, you are, man. So what? Look, it's a long time ago, yeah? I was defending myself. Wrong place, wrong time. Made a lot of bad decisions back then.
He's a longtime prisoner who claims to have an escape plan. While freeing Elias, Jacob sets several phages loose on Ferris, knocking him out of a window.
Why'd the warden?
Why'd you lie?
I told you. This is my kingdom. It's all yours. Hey, yo, the pizza here. Oh, nigga! My ears burn!
Elias convinces Jacob to break out a talented hacker isolated in the Special Housing Unit, or the SHU, which turns out to be Danny, to summon a ship for their escape, but Danny refuses to join them. Regardless, the two head to the hangar, but they're intercepted by Ferris, who's infected, but appears to retain his intelligence. They're ejected onto Callisto's surface, and Elias suffocates when his mask visor is damaged.
Elias! Elias! Get you to cover! gotta keep going. We gotta keep going. Come on.
No, bro. I'm done. Because of you. I got out.
See you on the other side.
Danny appears in a half-track, a vehicle they use to traverse the moon, and recovers Elias's memories of Black Iron and reluctantly decides to team up with Jacob as the infected personnel begin to mutate further and become more dangerous. Following a detour to the wreckage of Charon, where they only find medical supplies, the two make it up to the hangar to summon a ship to pick them up. However, Cole intervenes and shoots down the ship, stating that nobody is allowed to escape. The ship crashes into the hangar and it causes it to collapse, forcing Jacob and Danny to flee. With their only method of escape gone, Jacob and Danny decide that their only course of action is to confront Cole directly and get answers from him. They make their way through Arcus, Callisto's original colony, before it was abandoned with the Black Iron prison later built on top of it. They discover that Arcus suffered a similar outbreak to what happened in Black Iron, and the UJC subsequently exterminated the entire colony and covered it up. They also find a lab holding a dead alien creature that the original Arcus miners accidentally unearthed. And with that, they learn that the parasites that were found within the dead alien are how we've gotten our space zombies, or biophages. Seeing its potential for accelerating evolution, the UJC harvested the alien's larvae and began experimenting with it on humans, which ultimately caused the outbreak. However, there was one biophage, Subject 0, who somehow retained his intelligence before he was killed during the sterilization. After Jacob and Danny managed to fend off another encounter with Ferris, Danny ends up being infected. Once they return to Black Iron, Jacob is knocked out by a security robot and put back in his original cell. Jacob is freed from his cell by their prison doctor, Dr. Caitlin Mahler, the same woman who put the implant in his neck at the beginning, and she instructs him to meet her at her lab, where she claims she can cure Danny's infection and get him to Cole. She reveals that Cole is part of a religious sect called Callisto, attempting to enact a plan called the Callisto Protocol, which is to find a way to advance human evolution. He ordered Mahler to experiment on Black Iron prisoners to find a subject compatible with the alien infection and replicate Subject 0 with a Subject Alpha. Mahler also tells Jacob that the only way to cure Danny is to extract the Alpha's DNA, which can be used to synthesize an antidote, but is also Warden Cole's ultimate prize. When Jacob asks for the truth behind the outbreak on Europa, Mahler admits that a diluted version of the infection was accidentally released. The incident inspired Cole to initiate the outbreak in Black Iron by releasing Mahler's test subjects to find another Alpha. Mahler provides Jacob access to Danny's memories through their neural implants, where Jacob learns that Danny's sister was killed in the Europa outbreak. He recovers his own memories, showing he was aware that UJC was using his ship to smuggle alien larvae. He was aware, but remained willfully ignorant due to how lucrative the opportunity was. Jacob confronts Warden Cole, who pits him against Ferris, the Alpha, who's been indoctrinated into Callipolis.
Thought this was a curse, but then I realized it is a gift. Someone has opened my eyes. Show me my pelvis. Now, I'm gonna show you Get past me, maybe back up. Then you can run.
Despite Ferris's mutations, Jacob is able to defeat him and extract his DNA. Cole attempts to convince Jacob to turn over the DNA sample to him, arguing that it's pivotal to humanity's survival. And as the human race cannot survive long-term space travel without rapid advancements in its evolution. But Jacob instead uses it to cure Danny. Angered, Warden Cole activates the prison's self-destruct countdown, and he tells Jacob that he has still gathered enough data to carry out the Callisto protocol. Jacob puts Danny in the remaining escape pod, along with an alien larva sample, giving Danny all the evidence she needs to expose the UJC's secret experiment. As she fends off the biophages, Mahler contacts him and informs him to a possible escape if they work together, before Jacob is suddenly attacked by a still-living Captain Ferris. Now let me start by saying that I generally enjoyed the story of the Callisto Protocol. I thought it was interesting and intriguing for most of the way through. The only place where it lost me was where you get towards the end and all the pieces start coming together, but they don't really. The only problem that I really have with it is the fact that in the end it turns out that it's this evil organization, we're rich, we're evil, we wear masks, and we're so mysterious, even though it could have been honestly anything else. It would have been cool if it was, imagine if it was a hive mind trying to take control of everything, but, the UJC is trying to keep it under wraps because it's going to cause mass panic. Or imagine if it was, something crazy like a space demigod or something like that. It just didn't seem very impactful. I feel like that trope is played out. And the way that the game ended, it was rushed, it was too quick. We didn't really get a satisfying ending. And then following the story, obviously, we would talk about the characters next. And that's also another part of this game that I wasn't all too thrilled about. So the way that this game presents its characters, they're shallow. There's not much to them. And granted, it's fine to have flat characters, static characters, because sometimes that's all a story needs. But in this game where you're trying to get me to care about this main cast that we've got, it's just not really working. So if you really think about it, if we start with Jacob, what does Jacob really have personality-wise? Really. He's pretty much exactly like Isaac from the first Dead Space, the very first Dead Space, where Isaac does not speak. Or Elias. Elias dies in this story, and I just can't really bring myself to say that I cared. It was strange because throughout the story, Elias is helping you escape from the prison. And once you get to the end of that section, Elias finally starts telling you more about his backstory, but it doesn't really seem like the time, especially considering that he dies right after that. Then you've got other characters like Danny. I didn't really like Danny, which I think is insane considering the fact that Karen Fukuhara is an amazing actress. If you haven't seen The Boys, I genuinely suggest that you go check it out. She is great in that show. But in this, she's cold and mean to Jacob. And I guess I can understand at the beginning, right? And she starts warming up to him. But even so, if we're going off of the concept that she somehow knew that he was transporting these larvae that were basically infecting everybody, turning them into space zombies, biophages, that really wouldn't make sense. Only, in the sense that she doesn't know that for a fact. She saw the cargo that he was holding? Obviously not, because during the story she goes back to check. So, for whatever reason, she is unnecessarily cold and mean to Jacob for no real reason. And then we come down to Captain Ferris. And Captain Ferris, I gotta say, was both the most annoying, but also the most interesting character to me. Because he would keep popping up out of nowhere. And it would be like, okay, Like, sure, I guess if you want to attack me, go ahead. But he seemed to work like almost every single one of the other enemies. So it just didn't really... It didn't do it for me. So, and as a character himself, it was like he had this strange power fantasy. He was always basically pointing out to Jacob, oh, you're a House, I'm the alpha. And obviously that's the whole point, because the story points to him being the big boss at the end. But he still doesn't fit those shoes. And I mean, nobody really does. Not even the warden, because the warden is barely there. You see him in holograms. And even when you do see him in those holograms, he just kind of states to you, and he's like, oh, I'm doing this for your benefit. And then he disappears. And then it's like, oh, okay. It's like we never really get a chance to stop and see what these characters do. Like, the way that character writing works, I mean, at least from what I know, you can either tell a character story in flashbacks, which isn't the greatest, or you could tell a character story through the actions that they take. And I guess this story was going for the actions that one character would take, but the actions that they do take are kind of arbitrary and don't really do much for the overall story, at least from what I saw. But that is not to say that everything about the characters was terrible. I have to say, at the very least, every performance was on par. It was fantastic. I believed everything that they were doing. I just didn't understand it, or vice versa. I didn't really care, and that's not necessarily a good thing. Now, performance-wise, I didn't really have very many problems with the game, because when I got the game at launch, it was... I had it on console, so I didn't have the same problems that somebody on PC did, so I was pretty much all good there. The frames were fine, but the thing that really shines is the graphics. The graphics are state-of-the-art. It's some of the best stuff I've ever seen. And I think they know that, because they were most definitely trying to show off, especially with a lot of the zoom-ins on Josh Duhamel's face, or Jacob's face. And they were getting the beads of sweat and everything, man. It was like, they were like letting you know, hey, this is it, man. This is it. So on a performance front, I really have no issues, no problems there. I thoroughly think that was one of the best parts of the game. Now I'm going to get to the part that everybody's talking about, and that everybody is pretty divided on, I would say. The combat is interesting. I can't say innovative. They try something different, but it's not necessarily innovative. I can't say I hated it or loved it, but let me explain. So, the way the combat works, you have to, for me at least, because I'm a console player, I have to move my analog stick from side to side, from left to right, in almost this turn-based kind of combat where you can't lean the same way twice, otherwise you're definitely going to get hit. then they've also got this option for you to block, but I don't really suggest using that, only because every time you use block, you lose health, or at least that's how it was working for me. I I just thought it was easier to lean from side to side because you you don't get hit. It's literally foolproof. You never get hit if you just lean from side to side. However, if you are, fighting several enemies at the same time, then it starts to get a little iffy. That's where the combat starts to tank quite a bit. So, fighting one character head on, one enemy, it's not hard at all. Not if you're keeping track of the turns that you're taking. But once more step in and you start getting hit from sides and from the back. But you know what I mean. Getting hit from off camera, it's just not very conducive to a good combat system. Not only that, but there's a lot of times where the camera fights you, and it's at times not very fair. Now, don't take this the wrong way. Obviously, some combat might be for some people, and some combat might not be for certain people. For me, this combat was not very good. And I mean, even getting further into the game where you get, the force glove, whatever they call it, the GRP, the grip, and you're pulling the zombies towards you and you're tossing them onto the spikes and stuff. Even with that, sometimes the game overloads the screen with too many enemies. They want to give you a certain level of challenge. But even on medium difficulty, I mean, come on, I'm just a casual gamer, I'm not looking for anything outrageously difficult. But at the same time, this is coming from a guy who played through Elden Ring. So the combat it's all right. It's clunky for sure, but if you can make the best of it, try and get creative with it somehow, that would definitely help you out. So from what I can tell, there's 5 different enemy types in the game, or at least from what I've seen. There's the regular guys that, just kind of swing at you. There's big guys that take more hits of damage. There's these gross brain guys that spit larvae at you. There's the enemy that turns invisible and crawls on all fours. And then you've got this other enemy that is like a clicker from The Last of Us, so it's blind and it can't see you. So if it hears you, it'll attack. So out of these 5, I think the most difficult one to fight might have been the bigger one, the kind of big hulking fat dude, because he takes more hits of damage. So, you're kind of just wailing away at this guy. And then there's other monsters coming back at you, swinging at your back, and it's like, man, can I get a breather, please? Especially fighting one of the bigger enemies. But the easiest one to fight was actually the clicker type enemy. And it's strange because the way that I think it should have worked is if one of those enemies caught you, I think it would have been better to, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but it might have been better to just have that enemy kill you in one hit. That would have raised the stakes a little more. That would have forced you to get a little more creative with the stealth. But the way it worked was, even if you did get caught, the combat worked exactly the same as if you were fighting one of the normal enemies. So it was like, even if, you saw me, I'm not dead. And I could go back into a kind of crouch state and the other ones won't see me. So there was really no point in even making you blind, pretty much. It just made it a lot easier, especially because in The Last of Us, for example, you have a shiv, and the shivs break. But in the Callisto protocol, the one shiv, and that shiv never breaks. So you're just going around stabbing all these blind enemies in the back and then move on to the next one. And for some reason, the other ones don't hear that at all. So, I mean, it made it painstakingly easy through those sections. But then you got the big, great evil one of them all. You got this big hulking one that's split down the middle. He's got all these ribs poking out, and he's got two heads, and he takes a lot of hits of damage. And that's going to be a lot of boss fights. And I didn't really like that. I think reusing a boss can work, but I think when you do reuse a boss, you have to, I don't know, change it up a little bit. For example, they did do it for one of the boss fights where you're kind of stuck in this claustrophobic area and it's like swinging after you and you gotta move. It's where everything's flashing red and there's like a lot of smoke and stuff. And that was really good, I think. Well, good in the sense that it made you change your tactics a little bit, but not in the sense that, oh, you know, I'm fighting the same thing again, just in a different place. But I don't think it was that great to have that boss fight like 4 times. We could have cut that down to maybe 2. And like I said, if there was variation, there wouldn't be that much of a problem. And then finally, you know, you got, what's his name? Captain Ferris. And I don't even know what to say about his boss fight. It was difficult, I guess. But at the same time, it was like, the only thing making it difficult is the fact that they were throwing more enemies at me. They were throwing these enemies that, oh, that's an enemy I forgot. There's enemies that crawl and explode next to you. So that's something, I guess. Those enemies were really annoying, especially in the final boss fight where we're just kind of playing ring around the rosy and I'm trying to shoot him with everything I got.
What?
So having these enemies that are like slithering up to my ankles, like exploding next to me, I didn't really appreciate that. But at the same time, I mean, it wasn't that difficult in the end. It was just annoying more than anything. And I think that's one of the problems, especially with the combat of the Callisto Protocol. I never dreaded like the enemies or the design of the enemies, what they do, you know. I was dreading the combat more than anything. And that's not a good thing. I should relish the combat, but dread, you know, out of fear, the enemies that I'm fighting. And I kind of want to end off this video by saying, hey, if you enjoyed the Callisto Protocol, man, it's all good, you know? I enjoyed it too. I just didn't enjoy it as thoroughly as others. And I mean, like I said, I don't want this new IP to fail, so I'm hoping that when the next game comes around, you know, they've polished some things, changed some things around, and maybe we'll get an even better story, an even better game, and that'll be good for everybody, right? It's just that the game as it is now is not, you know, it's not as great as it could have been, because it was creating all this hype, and I was really excited for the game when it came out because I'm a huge Dead Space fan. So just to see the way that it turned out, I wasn't necessarily impressed, and I should have been. I like I'll say again, the thing that impressed me most was the performances and the graphics. That's pretty much it. The acting from everybody in the game is fantastic, and the game looks fantastic. But there are still fundamental issues that leave more yet to be desired. So, I think this game is a 5 out of 10. Maybe, you know, with some improvement, later on, for the sequel and stuff, this game can get better. But for the time being and for what we've been given, it's a 5 out of 10. Or maybe even a 6 out of 10. You know, I think that they've got a great foundation. They just have to build off of it. But with that being said, guys, I'd like to know what you thought of the game. Did you enjoy the game? What did you think was the best or worst part of the game? I want to know all the great different ideas that you've got down in the comments below. But in the meantime, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you guys in the next video.